When the email from Aunt Tolu popped into my inbox, I froze. It was an invitation to the Adeyemi family weekend in Boston. I hadn't been back in years. They had all called me the forgotten child when I was younger, as if my existence was a shadow they could ignore. My heart twisted, unsure if I wanted to face them. Yet something deep inside me said, go. See what they really want. My mother had died a year ago, leaving behind a sealed letter and a small, heavy key. At the time, I didn't understand why she had given them to me. Now, I wondered if this weekend had something to do with them. When I arrived at the estate, the grandeur of it hit me first. Polished marble floors, tall glass windows catching the Boston light, and the faint scent of old flowers mixed with expensive cologne. My cousins and aunts were there, smiling too brightly, laughter that felt rehearsed. Bayo, my cousin, came toward me first. He wrapped me in a hug that was too tight, almost crushing. We've missed you, Niba, he said, but the warmth in his eyes didn't reach the corners. I noticed a flicker there, something I hadn't seen before. A shadow of calculation, as if they were waiting for a cue I didn't know about. I clutched my mother's letter in my bag, suddenly aware of how heavy it felt. It seemed to hum with secrets, a quiet warning I couldn't yet read. I remembered her words when she handed it to me. This will protect you. Keep it close, my daughter. But protect me from what? From my family? From greed? My stomach nodded as I walked through the echoing halls, smiling and shaking hands, nodding to the distant aunts and uncles I barely recognized. That evening, as we gathered around the dining table, the tension grew under the surface of polite conversation. Every compliment felt like a test, every question like a trap. I realized that my presence here wasn't just a welcome. It was part of a plan I couldn't yet understand. Something was coming, something big, and I was standing right in the middle of it. I hugged the letter closer, my fingers brushing the key. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing. This weekend would change everything, and my family's smiles were sharper than they appeared. The family estate looked exactly as I remembered, almost like a museum frozen in time. The tall glass windows reflected the Boston skyline, polished marble floors gleamed under the chandeliers, and the faint smell of old wood mixed with perfume filled the halls. Laughter echoed around the rooms, but it didn't reach the eyes of my relatives. It was hollow, practiced, like actors playing their parts. Every smile I received felt sharp, almost cutting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting behind those polite faces. At dinner, the tension became impossible to ignore. Uncle Femi leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass, and casually brought up Grandma's will. The topic had never been discussed openly after her death, and suddenly, it hung over the table like a storm cloud. It's time we settle things, he said, tapping his glass as if it were a gavel. The inheritance belongs where it's useful. The room went quiet for a moment, everyone nodding in agreement, or maybe in fear. Everyone except me. I asked what he meant, my voice steady but cautious. He smiled tightly, just enough to make my stomach twist. You'll understand soon, dear, he said, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. I forced myself to finish dinner, every bite tasting bitter, every laugh feeling like a trap. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Curiosity and unease pulled me out of bed. As I walked down the dimly lit corridor, I heard hushed voices behind the slightly open study door. I froze, straining to listen. Once she signs, we transfer it quietly. She'll never know, one voice whispered. Another chuckled softly, full of satisfaction. My heart dropped. They were not just talking about money or property. They were talking about me, about my place in this family, and how they plan to erase it. I walked back to my room, my mind spinning. The smiles that had greeted me earlier now felt like knives, and the laughter I had heard was a warning I hadn't understood. I clutched my mother's letter and key, feeling them both heavy in my bag, as if they were the only anchors I had in this storm of deceit. That night, I didn't just feel like an outsider. I felt like a target, the center of a plan I had no idea how to stop. My family's intentions were hidden behind polished manners and perfect smiles, but I knew now. The truth would come out one way or another, and I had to be ready. That night, I locked my door behind me, the heavy click echoing in the quiet hallway. My hands trembled as I took out the letter my mother had left me before she died. It was simple, worn at the edges, but it carried a weight I had never fully understood until now. I unfolded it carefully, almost afraid the words themselves might burn my eyes. "My dearest Neba," it began, her familiar handwriting soft but firm. "If you're reading this, they've already started circling. The inheritance isn't what they think. It's a promise your grandmother made, and a secret she hid through you." My heart skipped a beat. I read it again, trying to absorb every word. Circling. Secret. Promise. My family's smiles, the sharp tension at dinner, the whispered plans I had overheard. All of it suddenly clicked into a dangerous puzzle. At the bottom of the letter, my mother had written a single line that made my blood run cold. Find the book she never finished. I held the letter closer, my fingers tracing the words. Grandma had been an award-winning writer, celebrated across continents, but her last manuscript was rumored to have vanished after her death. Everyone had assumed it was lost, a fragment of genius that would never see the world. But now, my mother's words made it clear. This manuscript was more than a story. It was a key, a hidden map that would unlock the truth about the inheritance they were so desperate to take. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the letter clutched to my chest, and tried to make sense of it. Why would a book matter more than money to my greedy relatives? Why had my mother left me this clue instead of protecting me in some obvious way? My mind raced through every memory of my grandmother, her quiet mornings at her desk, the scent of ink and paper filling the rooms. Could the manuscript really hold the secret to everything my family had been plotting? I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of the house, the occasional creak of a floorboard, the wind brushing against the windows, but sleep would not come. My thoughts circled around the letter, and that cryptic line. The warning, the promise, the secret. It was all tangled together like threads in a web. Something dark was brewing, and I could feel it closing in. My family's plan wasn't just about greed anymore. It was about control, and I was the one they wanted to trap. I held the letter tightly all night, the paper warm against my hands, my eyes wide open, imagining the hidden manuscript and the secret it carried. My mother had trusted me with it, and for the first time, I understood that this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about discovering the truth and protecting what was mine before anyone else could take it. I didn't sleep, because the night itself seemed to whisper that danger was closer than I had realized, and the next day would demand courage I wasn't sure I had. The next morning, the house felt quieter than usual. Everyone was bustling around, preparing for the family brunch, their laughter and chatter fading down the hall. I took a deep breath, my mother's letter burning in my mind, and quietly slipped out of my room. The key she had given me felt heavy in my hand, each step toward Grandma's old writing room making my heart pound faster. The door creaked softly as I turned it, and a wave of familiar smells hit me, dust, old paper, and ink. It was like stepping back in time, into the heart of my grandmother's world, the place where she had poured her soul into every word. The room was small but filled with the presence of her life. Books lined the shelves, stacks of papers lay scattered on the floor, and sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust and golden rays. My eyes immediately went to her desk, a large, cracked wooden piece that had seen decades of writing. I knelt in front of it, my hands shaking as I lifted a bundle wrapped in brown paper. The manuscript inside was thick, the title boldly written across the front, "The Last Daughter of Olumo." My breath caught. Could this really be it? I carefully untied the paper, and my eyes fell on something tucked inside, a folded legal document. My heart stopped. I unfolded it slowly, barely daring to hope. The words on the page made my hands tremble. It was Grandma's real will. Every property, every royalty from her books, every trust she had set up, all of it was in my name. I sank back against the desk, the weight of the discovery pressing down on me. My mother had known. That was why she had given me the key and the letter. She had trusted me to find this, to protect what was rightfully mine. For a moment, I just sat there, trying to process the truth. I was about to hold the proof that would change everything, that would finally put me in the place my family had tried to deny me for so long. I felt a surge of hope, relief, and fear all at once. But before I could even breathe, the floorboard outside creaked. My head whipped around, and there was Bayo standing in the doorway, holding my phone like a weapon. His smile was sharp, mocking, and full of suspicion. "Looking for something, cousin?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. My stomach dropped. In that instant, I realized the real battle had just begun. and they were ready to do anything to take this away from me. Within an hour, the house erupted into chaos. Bayo had already spread the story, his voice loud and sharp, telling everyone I had broken into Grandma's study and stolen private family papers. The room felt like it had turned upside down, whispers and gasps bouncing off the walls. Uncle Femi stormed in, his face red, eyes wild, demanding I hand over the manuscript immediately. "It belongs to the family," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I looked at him steadily and said, "I am the family." The words felt small compared to the roar of anger surrounding me, but I meant them. They didn't care. They laughed at me, cruel, mocking laughter that cut deeper than any words. Bayo stepped forward, snatching the manuscript from my hands. Uncle Femi grabbed the edges, shoving me aside as the paper slipped from my fingers. "This is fake. You forged it," they accused, their voices overlapping, a chorus of greed and lies. I tried to protest, tried to explain, but no one would listen. My family, the people I had once trusted, had turned on me in a single hour. Every smile from the night before now felt like a blade. By evening, I was kicked out of the estate. I walked away humiliated, my cheeks burning with shame. My name whispered and smeared through the halls I had once loved. My luggage was packed, the doors slammed behind me, and I felt the sting of betrayal in every step I took. The drive back to my small rented room in Boston was heavy, each passing streetlight casting shadows that felt like the memory of their eyes, judging, accusing, mocking. I couldn't believe this was the same family I had once called mine. But they didn't know one thing. While they laughed and claimed victory, I had taken photographs of every page in the manuscript. Each word, each legal clause, each secret my grandmother had left was safely stored on my phone. The proof was mine, untouchable, invisible to them. My mother had trusted me, and now I knew why. Even in their cruel triumph, they had left a mistake, a thread I could pull, a truth I could reveal. I sat that night in silence, scrolling through the photos, feeling a quiet fire building inside me. They had tried to erase me, to humiliate me, to steal what was mine. But the story was far from over, and soon, the world would see what they couldn't stop. A week later, my phone rang with an unknown number. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the screen, a mix of curiosity and caution twisting in my stomach. When I answered, a calm, professional voice spoke, full of excitement and warmth. "Is this Niba Adeyemi? We're thrilled to inform you that your late grandmother's unpublished manuscript, The Last Daughter of Olumo, has been selected as the centerpiece of this year's Boston Literary Gala." My heart stopped for a moment. I gripped the phone tightly, unable to speak at first. The same manuscript that my family had mocked, called fake, and tried to steal from me was now about to be celebrated on a stage far bigger than I had ever imagined. Every lie, every cruel laugh, every betrayal they had thrown at me suddenly felt powerless in the face of this news. The words echoed in my mind over and over. Selected, centerpiece, literary gala. I could almost see the hall filled with people, cameras flashing, and experts recognizing my grandmother's genius, and by extension, acknowledging me as the rightful heir to her legacy. I didn't waste a second. I emailed the photographs I had taken of the manuscript to the publisher, making sure every page, every word, every detail was verified. I needed the evidence to be undeniable. Each click of the send button felt like a strike of justice, a quiet but fierce reminder that I had the proof they couldn't erase. I double-checked the files, read over the documents, and for the first time since that disastrous family weekend, a wave of hope surged through me. The law of truth was on my side, and it was precise, unshakable. For hours, I sat staring at my phone, replaying the words from the call, imagining the scene at the gala. My family, who had tried to humiliate me, would be powerless to stop this. The manuscript they had laughed at, the very proof they had tried to snatch and destroy, was about to make me the center of attention, the inheritor of recognition, and the bearer of my grandmother's story. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of timing that even they couldn't manipulate. That night, I felt a quiet thrill that I had never known before. My mother's letter, my photographs, and my grandmother's wisdom had all led to this moment. The stage was being handed to me. Not because I begged, not because I fought with anger, but because truth, evidence, and talent never fail in the end. My family had wanted to keep me small, hidden, powerless. Instead, Fate was about to place me in the spotlight, where they could only watch and understand too late that I had already won. The Boston Literary Gala was like stepping into a dream I didn't know I could reach. The hall was alive with light, music, and the soft murmur of hundreds of guests dressed in elegance. Cameras flashed, and whispers floated through the air like sparks. I wore a deep blue dress, simple, elegant, not meant to dazzle, but meant to be remembered. Every step I took toward my seat felt heavy with anticipation, my heartbeat matching the rhythm of the event itself. As the host began announcing the evening's highlight, my eyes scanned the crowd. And there they were, Uncle Femi, Aunt Tolu, and Bayo. They hadn't been on the invitation list, but somehow they had arrived, trying to insert themselves into a world that was no longer theirs. My stomach tightened, but I kept my head high, my back straight, my hands calm. I had waited for this moment far too long to let their presence shake me. Then my name was called. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Niba Adeyemi, the rightful heir and literary representative of the Adeyemi estate. Gasps rippled through the audience. I stepped forward, my mind sharp, my chest swelling with the weight of truth finally recognized. On the big screen behind me, Grandma's handwriting appeared, her will pinned to the manuscript that had caused so much chaos in my life. Every word glowed with her wisdom, her love, and her justice. To my granddaughter Niba, the only one who loved words more than wealth. You are the keeper of my story and my fortune. My voice didn't even shake when I read it aloud to the hall. The applause was deafening. People stood, clapping, some cheering, some wiping tears. Every eye was on me, every mind understanding the legacy I had fought to protect. And my family, they were frozen. Uncle Femi's jaw tightened, Aunt Tolu's face went pale, and Bayo's confident smirk vanished completely. They looked like paper blown by a sudden wind, exposed, powerless, and shocked beyond repair. The truth, once hidden, was now clear for everyone to see. The manuscript, the will, the evidence I had fought to keep safe, it was all shining under the bright lights of Boston, undeniable, and public. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of justice and recognition in the same moment. They had tried to erase me, humiliate me, and steal what was mine. But here, in this room filled with brilliance and truth, I stood taller than they ever could. And they knew in every silent second that their games had failed. I was no longer invisible. I was seen, honored, and untouchable. After the gala ended, the crowd began to thin, but a swarm of journalists had already surrounded my family. Microphones and cameras pointed at them like hunting arrows. Reporters shouted questions, relentless and sharp. Is it true you accused her of forgery? One asked. Another pressed. Why did you hide the manuscript for years? Their voices were full of curiosity, judgment, and a hunger for truth. Uncle Femi stumbled over his words, trying to force an answer, but sweat beaded on his forehead and his confident facade crumbled with every question. Aunt Tolu's hands shook as she adjusted her dress, eyes darting between reporters and Bayo. Bayo himself tried to smile, tried to charm, but the cracks in his act were obvious. They had been exposed, their lies laid bare for the world to see, and they couldn't spin their way out of it. Every pause, every fumble, every quick glance told the story they had tried to hide. Greed, envy, betrayal. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I walked calmly past them, holding the golden plaque awarded posthumously to my grandmother. The award glimmered under the hall lights, a symbol of the recognition and justice that had been denied to her in her lifetime, but could not be denied now. In my hand, it felt heavier than any inheritance, heavier than any money they had wanted to steal. It carried her vision, her words, and the proof that she had seen me when no one else had. I could see their faces, pale and frozen, as the cameras captured every reaction. Their anger, confusion, and helplessness were broadcast to the world, but I felt nothing but calm satisfaction. They had tried to erase me, humiliate me, and claim what wasn't theirs, but she had written her justice in ink. Every word of her manuscript, every clause in her will, every page I had secretly photographed had been her shield, her voice speaking through me. That night, I understood the full power of truth. My family had wielded lies like weapons, but their weapons were weak against her foresight. The applause of the gala, the flashes of cameras, and the recognition of the literary world were mine to keep. They had tried to steal my inheritance, to take what was mine by right, but they couldn't hide from history, from evidence, or from the world that now knew everything. The legacy belonged to me, protected by her love and her careful planning, and there was nothing they could do to change it. Months later, I returned to the family estate, walking up the familiar marble steps with a quiet calm I hadn't felt before. The house, once filled with tension and whispered schemes, now felt different, still grand, still imposing, but no longer a place of fear or shame. It was mine legally and rightfully, but I didn't feel the need to announce it with anger or pride. I didn't throw anyone out. I simply walked through the halls with purpose, taking care of what truly mattered. The first thing I did was change the locks on Grandma's study. That room had been the heart of her life and creativity, the place that had protected her secrets and now mine. I turned it into a small literary retreat, a space for young writers to come, learn, and find their own voices. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, dust dancing in the golden light. I imagined the stories these walls would now hold, not just mine or my grandmother's, but new ones, fresh voices discovering their courage and power. It felt right. It felt like justice lived in every corner. One afternoon, as I arranged books on the shelves, I heard the hesitant sound of footsteps behind me. Bayo appeared, his shoulders slumped, his confident arrogance replaced with shame. He didn't speak at first. When he finally found his voice, it was soft, almost breaking. He asked for forgiveness. I turned to him slowly, looking into his eyes, seeing the regret he couldn't hide. I smiled gently, not out of weakness, but from understanding. "I forgave you the day you called me nothing," I said quietly, "because from that day, I started becoming something." He nodded, shame and a hint of relief in his eyes. It was a silent acknowledgement that the past could not be rewritten, that the pain he caused had been transformed into strength on my side. I didn't need to lecture him, punish him, or shout victory. There was no speech, no dramatic proclamation, just peace, a deep, quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you fought with truth, not revenge. As I walked through the estate that evening, the sun setting over the Boston skyline, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. The house was alive again, but this time with honesty, creativity, and the future I chose to build. My family had tried to steal from me, humiliate me, and erase me, but I had come home not to conquer, but to create. And in that choice, I found the kind of victory that truly matters. The peace of having lived and fought for what was right, and the freedom to write my own story without fear. A year later, I stood on a small stage in a brightly lit hall, looking out at a sea of eager faces. Young African writers had gathered, notebooks in hand, eyes full of curiosity and hope. They had come to learn from Niba Adeyemi, the girl who had once been called the forgotten child, now a best-selling author with her grandmother's legacy in her hands. My heart swelled with quiet pride, but it wasn't the kind that came from fame or money. It was the kind that came from knowing I had survived, learned, and grown. In my hands, I held the published copy of The Last Daughter of Oyemo, Grandma's book finally complete, its pages alive with her words, her secrets, and her wisdom. My mother's letter, the one she had left me before she died, was printed as the foreword. I opened the book carefully, my fingers brushing over the worn edges of her handwriting. When I reached the last line she had written to me, I felt a lump in my throat. "They'll try to erase your name, but remember, stories are louder than greed." I read the line aloud, letting it linger in the quiet of the hall. The audience remained still for a moment, absorbing it, then erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, warm, and real. Somewhere in that thunderous clapping, I felt their presence. My mother, my grandmother, watching proud, not because I had won the inheritance, but because I had become something they had always known I could be. For years, my family had tried to diminish me, to steal what was mine, to convince me that my worth was tied to money and recognition. But now I understood. It had never been about that. It had been about becoming the story they could never rewrite, about taking the pieces of my past, the betrayal, the letters, the manuscript, and turning them into something larger than any fortune. I closed the book gently, the weight of it comforting and powerful at the same time. The young writers looked at me with admiration and curiosity, but I knew that the lesson wasn't about fame, awards, or wealth. It was about resilience, courage, and the truth that stories, real stories, written with love, patience, and integrity, outlive greed, deceit, and selfish ambition. As I stepped down from the stage, applause still echoing, I smiled. feeling a lightness I hadn't known in years. I had claimed my inheritance, yes, but the real victory was deeper, richer, and far more lasting. I had become the story, and no one could ever take that from me.